Ramadan Mubarak. My name is Matt Larson, and that is an Arabic greeting for Blessed Ramadan. It's used similarly to Merry Christmas, but instead of referencing Christmas, it references the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. My first time leaving the country, I flew over to Sana'a, Yemen to visit a friend who was working there, and I just so happened to arrive during the month of Ramadan. I thought it was a really cool time, a really interesting time, and so today I wanted to talk all about Ramadan. First I want to tell you about the technical aspects of Ramadan, then I want to talk about how Ramadan is observed, and finally I want to talk about some of the effects of Ramadan. So what is Ramadan? Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. The Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar, so the 9th month of their calendar is not September for us. It's a different time. Each month is basically one lunar cycle. So how did Ramadan start? Well, it's believed that in the month of Ramadan, God, Allah, sent the Archangel Gabriel down to Muhammad and gave him the Quran. And it wasn't just him handing Muhammad a book. He basically is believed to have imbued him with the knowledge to write it. Similar to how Christians believe that God inspired the authors of each book of the Bible to write them. So it's kind of an interesting similarity there. What is the point of Ramadan? Well, according to BBC, Muslims believe that Ramadan helps them to gain better self-control, it makes them more pious, and also it helps them to better understand the plight of people who are less fortunate. And I'll talk more about that later on, but that's one of my favorite things about Ramadan. So, now I know about what Ramadan is, let's talk a little bit about how it is observed. So, as I said before, Ramadan is a fasting time. During Ramadan, people fast, and it's not just, I'm not going to drink Mountain Dew for a month. It's much more difficult than that. When you're observing Ramadan as a Muslim, you don't eat, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't chew, and that's just the consuming things. There's also vices, such as couples having sex. There would be no talking bad about people behind their backs, and no fighting. Anything that's a vice is pretty much cut out of their lives for the entire month. And that is from sundown, or sun up, till sundown every single day. So, as you can imagine, that's pretty tough, and some people might not be able to handle it. So there are some exemptions made. People who are elderly, people who are traveling, people who are sick, anyone in that category is allowed to skip a day or more if they need to, but also if they're able to make up for this, they have to either A, feed a poor person for each day they missed, or they can make up for those days by fasting a different day in the future. And again, that is if they're able. So it's kind of nice that there's some exemptions made for people who wouldn't be able to do it healthily. Now, also, one thing that goes on is, as I said, people give to the poor. And that can be for this makeup day kind of thing, or people are supposed to feed a poor person and clothe them on the last day of Ramadan, which is Eid, and it's a celebration, and so they do this so that the poor person can join in on the celebrations and have a good time with them. Now, these are all good things, but as you can imagine, there's some people out there who have to try to ruin it for everyone or cheat the system. And these people basically have found out that they can sleep during the day and stay up all night, and this is technically following the rule of no eating or drinking during the daytime in Ramadan. And I don't think that is forbidden, but it's looked down upon and it's pretty shady. It's kind of funny, but sad, because they're not really getting the whole point of Ramadan. So, now let's look at some of the effects of Ramadan when it's celebrated or observed correctly. As you can imagine, businesses are disrupted a bit by Ramadan because people aren't eating. The New York Times has an article which talks about some of the statistics on it, and it shows that there are pretty large disruptions in productivity during the month of Ramadan. And also, an interesting thing I thought was that for countries that have different lengths of days, say you're an 8-hour day of sunlight compared to a 10-hour day of sunlight, there's actually a pretty noticeable change in productivity between those two countries during Ramadan. Another thing that's disrupted is air travel. During Ramadan, the TSA will put up on their website a notification talking about things you might see during that month. You'll see a lot more, it states that you'll see a lot more Muslims praying, reading the Quran, playing with prayer beads, and reciting prayers out loud or cleaning themselves before prayer. These are all standard things that Muslims do, but during that month they're going to be doing it a lot more because it is a month of spirituality and getting closer to God. So another thing that can happen during air travel is that Muslims who are working on the plane can have a bit of a hard time with their fasting. And that's because say you're playing and you're following the sun up to sundown is going to be a much longer period than it would naturally be because you're following the sun. And so an exemption has been made for these people too. They can basically choose to observe Ramadan based on the time frame in a city such as Mecca or a nearby large city. And so that means that someone won't have to fast for 24 hours unless they choose to. Another thing that's affected by Ramadan is people's health. Muhammad Yaqub posted a research paper in 2011 that kind of went over some studies of people groups from sizes of 60 to over 200. And these studies all showed that there were some really beneficial effects for people who are trying to lose weight and who were also celebrating or observing Ramadan. It's because it helps you with self-control, and also because fasting for a month will help you lose weight naturally. And finally, one of the coolest effects of Ramadan, I think, is the fact that it helps people gain a sensitivity towards people who are less fortunate. And that's because of partially the feeling of giving to people who need something during the day of Eid, and also when you're trying to do your makeup days. But also there's the kind of empathy that you gain by fasting for a month, because you gain an understanding of what it's like to not have food. And so if you see someone on the street who hasn't eaten in a while, you're probably going to feel a little bit more for them than someone who has never gone without food a day in their life. And so I think that's pretty cool and a neat thing that happens because of Ramadan. So now we've talked about some of the technical aspects of Ramadan. We've talked about how it is celebrated. And finally we talked about the effects of Ramadan. And I really hope that after hearing all of this, you gain a better understanding of the Muslim culture, and next time you hear someone talking about some crazy thing that's happening over in the Middle East, some ISIS attack or something ridiculous done by extremists, which is terrible, I hope you'll remember that these are normal people, and there are many, many of them. In fact, the majority of them are all fantastic people who are just like you and me, who will find sneaky ways around the rules, who will do kind things for people they don't even know, and who will spend time with their families and just, observing their religion and trying to have a good time and better themselves. And I just really hope that sticks with anyone who's paid attention to this. Thank you.